Good morning, students. To begin with the first chapter of history, we are going to learn about sources of history. Sources means information which we get of the past events. Before we start with introduction, we should know that basically history is divided into three parts, namely ancient, medieval, and modern. So, in this chapter, we are going to learn only about the ancient and medieval sources. I repeat, sources means information. So, let's start with introduction. The period from 9th century till 18th century is termed as medieval period. CE stands for Common Era. Now, Common Era means whatever happened, the significant thing happened during that time, that century. That's called as a Common Era. Moving on to the next point, we carry on with history gives us information. Now, what history gives us? It shows the progress of human civilization, and this study is done on the basis of chronological, scientific, and systematic. Now, chronological means events which has taken place according to that period. Second, scientific proof based on material study for history. Now, this is related to the research study. That is, whatever been found, it has been proved. And the third one is related to the systematic, considering the account of events taken place are written in a proper order. Now, these things are written down, noted on the basis of the past events. Okay, next we'll go to the importance in the study of history. Now, in this, since we are related to a society, individual, place and time, so all these are important factors and where we learn more. So first we'll start with the individual. Now, the individual is based on the task or the role in the society played by the individual. It can be grown up or child. Society, what type of society an individual belongs to in a group or as a leader, whatever level it is. The third we have is a place. Now this can be related to the settlement or related to an occupation. The third is time and which year. This is related to, as we have an introduction about this incident has taken a place in the medieval period, which century, 9th century, 18th century. All these things comes under the time. Going ahead, we go to the next part that is related to continuing with the introduction. We'll just go to the next, that is the material sources. Now, in material sources, here we have few of the examples that is related to the memorials, forts, buildings, caves, sculptures, inscriptions. Students, I showed you the clippings of memorials, buildings, cave, sculptures, inscription. Now, what are these examples highlighting? It is highlighting about the ideas which were brought for about in the development of architecture, the quality of arts, the economic conditions, and standard of living of the people in that particular period. So basically it is showing us what? It is showing us the progress. And even in the inscriptions, what are we seeing? We are seeing the script which is used, which is written on the walls. Continuing with that, we come to the next part of material source, that is copper and coins. Copper plates and coins were used based on the rulers, based, and that also based on the governance related to the religious ideas and personal details. Basically, the coins were used only for the transaction and economic purpose. And from these coins, plates, copper plates and coins, we can make out the metals which they were using those time. The religion coordinations and the language used during those periods. So these are all main highlights how things were changing. This is a part of a civilization, slow and steady process of civilization, human civilization. And next we have is in material source is coins. Now it is given that it helps us to know the ruler, governance, religious ideas, personal details and the period. We also learn about the financial transactions, economic condition, progressive metals and language use. That is connected to the previous clippings. I had shown you about the coins and the copper plate. That is the same continuation of this. The next part of the source we have is the written source. Now this plays a very important role. In the previous we were mentioning only about the material source, that is related to the ideas and development of architecture. Now in this we have documents used. People started making documents, they preserved the document, languages were introduced, how people followed the languages. Here we have most of the changes we can see. That means men started moving ahead from the building structure to the document level. Now here we have in these two clippings, we have in the royal courts how documents were used. And then we have related to the judicial orders. This is related to also related to the court orders or related to the country whoever is governing. So people has to follow these. Once these rules are laid up, people has to follow. Amendments cannot be made, but we have to live according to these law. It was initiated in that purpose. Okay, the next one we have is related to the languages. Main purpose of documentation. Without knowing languages, it is not easy for anyone to understand or think or how to write the concept. So languages were given much more priorities. This was in terms of the communication purpose, not orally but by written document. So here we have few languages which was given more important, that is Devangiri, uh, then we have is the Arabic, then we have is the then we have is the Modi script. These are main highlighted scripts what we have it in the written source. Continuing with that, it is also mentioned beyond all these ruling the related to the documents, then related to the script, that is the regional languages, we will continue with the written sources mentioning how the lifestyle was mentioned in the history. So here we have the written source help us to get information about diet, attire, that is the dress what they used, conventions, that is this is agreement related to two parties or related to two places. Then rules of conduct of people, that means they had some norms to be followed. You cannot be an independent. You have, when we are living in a society or in a group, whatsoever it is, we have to follow something. So these things were written for whom? For the people to understand. And definitely that also was connected to the life of people in general and festival. That means whatever festival now also we are celebrating, there is some connection with the traditional customs and rules, cultures, whatever. We are bound to it. So that means it has been passed. Things have been there. In the holy books also we are following things from the holy books. So these are what? These are all comes under the written sources. And the next part we have is related to the travelogues. Now travelogue means what? The people who keeps on traveling. Now since we have internet and also it is easy to Google out and come and to know things much more in detail. No need to go through books and all. But those time it was not that. People never used to travel like that. Only hardly people who had some work that is related to the trade purpose or any other business transaction purpose, they used to move from one area or one place or one country or state to the other. So during that time, we had few of the people who came across to the other nations, and they learned whatever they saw over there. So that is called as a travelogue. Here we have few examples. Al-Biruni, Ibn Battuta, Nicolau Manussi. These are the famous travelogues who wrote things, and they started giving ideas, their opinion, how the civilization took place. Wherever they traveled, they noted down. And then the last part about the written source we have is the biographies. Now what is biography means? It means the policies, that is the rules which has been laid by the rulers with the other rulers. Like how we have, India is having certain norms, conditions when they are doing the trade with the other foreign countries. We do have certain norms to be followed. It's not like I can go and do the business or they can come. No, we have certain rules and policies to be followed. So that means in those times also they were following. So these things are all written related to the rulers or related to the country. So that is called as biographies. Continuing with that, we have the next and the last source. What we are going to learn is the oral source. Students, we learned in the beginning that about the material source, which is related to the development in the architecture. Next, we learned about the written source, how things were written down, and languages was introduced, scripts were written out, and then people were made. That means people followed. And here we have is related to the oral source. Now oral source means what? Whatever is not been written anywhere, it is just passed from one generations to the other. Nowadays in schools and all we have books and all. That is the modern generation. But during the before that, we never had a proper school such. People used to sit under the tree and they used to learn. The gurus was there to teach them. They never noted down anything. Nowadays we are writing down notes. Teachers are giving notes on the board. There's so many things are going on, right? But during those time, these things were not accessible. But how they continued with it, with lots of explanation, with lots of examples. That means they were paying attention to all these things. So they remember. Till dated also we have among us, we will be having our grandparents who will be telling us when they was child what was the incident happened. Though we don't know from the newspapers, we don't know anything. Though we don't have any idea about the things which happened in the past, but it is not an evidence. But we know it had taken place through them, through our parents, we can come to know. So this all comes under the oral sources. Continuing with the written source, we begin with the next source, that is oral source. Now oral source means what? it is to be understood, things whatever it is been said, not written. So the things whatever we are saying, it is just passing from one generations to the another. Okay, and how we are passing, they are being passed to different ways, patterns are being used. It can be done either in the mean of speech, song, folk tales, narrations, proverbs, gathas, shloks, abhangas. So many different patterns are used in terms of oral source to pass from one generations to the other. So now in the next part here we have oral source makes it possible for a society to pass knowledge across generation without heavy dependence on writing. Now this is connected to what, whenever you are staying with your family and all, definitely at home also we have certain norms, but these norms are not written anywhere. It has been instructed by our parents to us, right? So this is what, there is nothing to be written. Is there any purpose for writing the norms? No. If parents has given us instructions, so we have to follow it. So all this comes under what class? It comes under the oral source. Okay. And the last part here we have is they are also used to teach children and adult about important aspects of their culture, as well as help people make sense of the world. Now this is a very important source related to the oral. Why? Because in the written and in the material, what we have learned, only the progress and the lifestyle we have learned, and the document was made using the various languages, right? But here it is was saying it is connected with our daily life. Since we are born, it's really a generation gap. You often say it's a generation gap, right? But some, even though there's a generation gap, students, we have certain principles to be followed. We have certain traditions and customs to be followed. Now how these traditions and customs are being followed, are they written somewhere in? They are not written, but it has been passed from our great grandparents to us. So what are we doing? We're carrying on things what is given by our ancestors. So we know that no, this cannot be done because my grandma told me, my mummy told me, my father told me. We have so many things to say, right? So this is what it is help making people understand. And definitely as we are carrying on these things in our mind, in our works, in our deeds and all. So what are we doing? We are doing passing on from, transmitting from one to the next coming generation. Students, now we learnt about the sources of history. Now sources means what? Which is based on the authentic proof that is written. Now here we have one more that is connected to the bakar. Bakar means, it's a Marathi term. It means the information. And before we conclude, we have the famous poet Pramanand. He composed Sri Shiv Bharat, a Sanskrit biography. So these are all comes under what? It comes under the written. A biography about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. This is written, and then we have is related to the Tariq. These all things comes under the written source. Tariq means what? A sequence of event which has been followed one after the another. And one more thing we have, it's related to the written source only, that is during the Europeans, whenever these Europeans they came to India, that is during the medieval time, they also wrote so many things related Indian civilization. So we can come to know how our history is being spread to the other countries. During that time, we have Grandaf, Robert Arm, and MC Sperengel who visited and they wrote things. These people are termed as the travelogues. So by concluding, we have to relate one more part, that is why we are giving importance to the rewriting of history. This is a concluding part, class. Why we have to write? See, so history is already written, we are learned, we know about it. Then again, why there is one more time to be written? Yes, it has to be. Why history? History means it's a research study. So it's an ongoing process. Through research, we definitely come across many new things. So these new research, whatever we get through research, we get new information. This has to be updated, which has to be written time to time. So rewriting of history is very important part of history. I hope it's clear with all. Thank you.